So the other skill I want to show is that we can check to make sure that the input is of a particular type. Now, remember that when we do an input or when we use a text entry box, the input will be held as a string. So even if we type in numbers, it will treat it as numbers that do not have an ability to do calculations. So later on, we do need to convert it into either an integer or a float. That's what I've done later on. However, what we can do with the input is that we can check to see if it would still fit that type of value. So what I mean by that is, if I run the program as I see here, I'm saying to the user, please type a number. So I know I want a number to come in. I'm going to use it later in a calculation, and in fact I'm going to use it in a calculation with a decimal, so I need it to be a float. I need it to allow it to have decimals. Now there's nothing to stop the user typing in just words, but if they do and I try doing a calculation, it will fail, even if I try to change that into float. So what I need to do is, as soon as the value comes in, I need to check that it could, or that it does contain values that would be floating point. And what I do is I use the try, except, else construct. What you would normally see is, when I do a float, when I ask something to be converted to a float here, using the float function, what I would normally do is I would put the value out into a variable, like I have on line 9. So line 9 says, put into the variable thing out 1, whatever the value of thing in 1 is, converted to a floating point number, a number with decimals, times by 1.4. So I'm saying, make sure I allow it to have decimals, the value in, and times it by 1.4 and put it into a variable. That's how you'd normally see this line. But what we can do here is I am just stating. So I've asked for the value to come in, and I'm just saying float thing in 1. And what this one line is doing, well, the try and the one line here, is it's doing a check. Is the value put into the input, can it be stored as a floating point number? If it cannot, i.e. if it's got words in it, it will go into the except part. What it does is it just checks whether the value here is true or false. Is it true that thing in 1 is a floating point? If it is true, then, if it's not true, then it will print, it will do whatever is in the except part. If this thing is true, it will then go into the else part. And what I found was, although I am checking, can thing in 1 be a floating point number, i.e. is it only numbers or a decimal point, I still, when I used it, had to actually convert it to that. Let me show you this program running. Wants a number, but what if I say hello? So I press enter. There. It did the check. It found that the response that was input could not equate to a floating point number. And then it said, it came into the except, and it said, nope, not true. And it did whatever I asked it to do in that case. If, on the other hand, I put in, well, I can actually put in any number, but I'll put in one with a decimal. And there, it has done I don't know why I put a bracket there. It has done the calculation for me because it has checked that it is going to be possible to make it into a floating point value, and it lets it carry on. Now without this, you would have put in the first input, hello, you would have tried to calculate, you would have tried to change hello into a floating point number, and it would just crash. It would just go, that can't be a number. By doing this, these simple 3 lines, try, except, else, what you're doing is you're saying, check if this is a possible truth in this time it's running. If it is not a truth, if thing in 1 cannot be a floating point number, go to the next part. Otherwise, go and if it's true, if it works, carry on. I'm going to just bring in here the round that I showed in the last video. So now what I've done, I've got the output, it's worked, and then I'm doing one more step. I'm doing a calculation, I'm doing a rounding, so that even if the number is long, 5, 6, 7, 8, so if I run this again, now that comes to rounded to 2 decimal places. I didn't look closely there, but I have a feeling it may round down, but I'm not sure. But you will be able to see that if you watch the video again. If you want more details, I highly, highly recommend that you look for W3 Schools, Python, try, except, and that will give you some tryout options and some options to actually use yourself to do try, except and else, or W3 Schools, Python, round. And there are some excellent examples there. So that's this quite a simple program, not too complicated. It's a core Python program. I'm going to just show you in the last couple of moments. Here is a longer program that I have written. I wrote this so that I could have a running GUI, graphic user interface, so it uses tkinter. So I've done a video which talks you through the whole of this, writing this program here. Here we're calling tkinter, importing everything. Here we're drawing or getting our window ready. We're defining a special variable. Down at the bottom, I'm making some radio buttons, an entry box and a label, and drawing them. And then I have a function here that I've defined that brings the values in when they press the buttons. So I just want to show you here that this is me using that try, except, else. Here, this time, the value that has come in, rather not the value that's come in, but the entry value, the value that was typed in. Just run this for you. Because we're converting a currency, this needs to be a number, and it's going to be there's going to be a calculation happening. It's kicked off when I press one of these. I've done some nonsense programs straight after, but here we go. Here we go. So that value from the entry box is checked to make sure it is a floating point, or it can have a decimal. It can be a decimal number, i.e. it's not text. If I run that again, put hello, and press one of these, it should just print oh no down here. There, it printed that. And then later on, I've also done a rounding. These pieces here are a bit moodling around, but up here I've done a conversion depending on whether it's euro or pounds. And this one has used round.